Tonight, on this special edition of 60 Minutes Presents, Honoring Our Troops.
Did you think you were going to die?
I didn't think I was going to die. I knew I was.
You knew you were going to die?
I knew I was going to die.
Dakota Meyer was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama for his almost insane bravery after his patrol was ambushed in Afghanistan. What makes the honor unusual is that the mission was a failure, even though Meyer helped save dozens of lives.
You either get them out alive or you die trying. If you didn't die trying, you didn't try hard enough.
Why did you come back here?
To try and let it go. It's something that haunts me every day.
Stephen Cornford was awarded the Silver Star for Valor after fighting in Iraq. He's one of the many young Americans wounded in body or spirit who were invited back to the war zone for a new kind of therapy.
My wife brought up a good point when I told her I wanted to do it. She's like, what if it makes it worse? What if it brings it all back?
Hey, he's saying they don't want you guys going through there.
We've covered a lot of stories on the war in Afghanistan for 60 Minutes, but this is not a story about war and battle. It's a story about brothers. And believe it or not, we found 5 sets of them serving side by side in the same battalion.
In all your years, you've been in the Marines, 17 years. Have you ever seen this many brothers together serving at the same time?
No, not at all.
Same place?
It's history in the making, if you ask me.
Good evening. I'm Scott Pelley. Welcome to 60 Minutes Presents. Tonight, during this Memorial Day weekend, we honor our troops by bringing you some of the stories that they've shared with us. We begin with Never Seen the Like. That's what a helicopter pilot told CBS News correspondent David Martin about witnessing a 21-year-old Marine stave off a Taliban ambush that threatened to overrun his unit. The Marine was Dakota Meyer, a Kentucky farm boy who received the nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, from President Obama at the White House. Meyer was on a mission in the Ganjgal Valley of Afghanistan, where he repeatedly ran a gauntlet of enemy fire in a desperate effort to save his fellow Marines. Dakota Meyer will tell you that story tonight, but there is much more to it than his almost insane bravery. This was an operation which went terribly wrong. So wrong that 2 Army officers were issued career-ending letters of reprimand. It's a story as old as combat. When a warrior's leaders let him down, he has nothing to fall back on but his own courage. Dakota Meyer will tell you he was just doing his job, but when you see and hear what he did, you too may say, I've never seen the like.
Dakota Meyer grew up shooting game on this farm in Greensburg, Kentucky, and can hit a squirrel at 750 yards. But it wasn't his marksmanship that earned him the Medal of Honor. It was his astonishing courage.
Did you think you were going to die?
I didn't think I was going to die. I knew I was.
You knew you were
I
going to
knew
die?
I was going to die.
The battle took place in this remote valley deep in enemy territory in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Meyer ran a gauntlet of fire not once but 5 times, with insurgents shooting down on him from 3 sides.
So why are you going in there?
There was U.S. troops getting shot at, and those are your brothers.
4 Marines were trapped in the village of Ganjgal after a patrol of 9 Americans, both Marines and Army soldiers, and 45 Afghan military was ambushed. Afterwards, the Army Center for Lessons Learned produced this animated recreation of what happened. The patrol set out for what was supposed to be a friendly meeting with village elders. Rocky terrain forced them to get out of their armored vehicles and move in on foot.
They're walking up toward the village. What happens next?
Right at daylight, they open fire on them. The enemy starts raining down. They had mortars, rockets, rocket-propelled grenades, and small arms fire.
They were waiting for you.
They were.
This was an ambush.
Oh, it was. We were set up.
With an estimated 100 to 150 enemy fighters dug in on the high ground above them, the Marines called for artillery fire from a nearby base. The first rounds missed, so First Lieutenant Michael Johnson, one of the 4 Marines trapped inside the village, radioed new coordinates of the enemy positions. But the commanders in the operations center back at the base refused to fire.
They denied it. The Army denied it and told him it was too close to the village. And he said, too close to the village. And the last words I heard him say was, if you don't give me these rounds right now, I'm going to die.
Did he get the artillery fire?
No, he didn't. The response was basically, try your best.
An investigation conducted after the battle determined that 2 Army officers making those decisions in the operations center that day were clearly negligent. The actions of key leaders in the command center, the report said, were inadequate and ineffective, contributing directly to the loss of life which ensued. Because of what the report calls poor performance and an atmosphere of complacency, the operations center just did not realize how bad the situation was until it was too late.
You can't sugarcoat it.
Now retired, Colonel Richard Hooker conducted that investigation.
The 2 principal officers that were named in the investigation failed to discharge their duties in a responsible way, in a way that the Army and the country has a right to expect them to behave.
Among the findings, 2 Kiowa helicopters armed with rockets and machine guns were minutes away from Ganjgal, but never made it into the battle.
They were on another mission, but they were close at hand.
How far away in terms of minutes?
I would estimate 5 to 10 minutes flight time.
Those helicopters actually broke away from that other mission and headed toward Ganjgal, but were recalled because the request had not gone through proper channels. The troops under fire didn't know that. They were told the helicopters would be there in 15 minutes.
Up to this point, it's been 15 minutes and no air support yet. So they requested again, and they said 15 more minutes.
So 15, now you're at 30 minutes on air.
At 30 minutes, and I'm hearing the radio traffic, and now it's starting to get worse. Gunny Kennefic, I believe it was, come across the radio and said, I can't shoot back because I'm pinned down. They're shooting at me from the house, and it's so close.
Gunnery Sergeant Aaron Kennefic was one of the 4 trapped Marines.
It's 15 minutes are starting to add up.
They are, yeah. We're at almost 45 minutes, no air support. I believe that the enemy started seeing, well, they're not getting what they need. Let's take advantage of this opportunity.
Dakota Meyer, one of the youngest, lowest-ranking Marines on the battlefield, took charge.
We had to do something, and we requested to bring a truck in. We were told no. All your guys are in there getting lit up, and you want to be in there helping them. And we waited about 5 minutes maybe, and we requested again. We were told no. So we requested again about 2 minutes later, and we were told no again. So I looked at Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Chavez and I said, we're going in.
Staff Sergeant Juan Rodriguez Chavez, who would receive the Navy Cross, the nation's second highest honor, drove an armored truck toward the village, while Meyer manned the gun turret.
It felt like the whole valley turned on this truck.
You were it.
It was like, we're it. Like, here comes the big target. The enemy was just, they were just running right at you, at the truck.
So this is not just raining fire down. Now they're trying to swarm the truck?
It's just like a killing fest for them, I think.
How close were rounds coming to you when you were doing this?
The rounds were hitting the turret, and I just kept moving back left and right, left and right. There was so much fire, it sounded like static over top of your head. I was just waiting for one of those rounds to hit me in the face.
How close is the enemy getting to you?
15, 20 meters.
Close.
Yep.
As depicted in the Army animation, dead and wounded Afghan soldiers who had been part of the patrol lay scattered along the valley floor.
I would run and try to assist as many Afghans as I could.
So you get out of the truck?
I'm out of the truck on foot.
So you're out in the open in the killing zone?
I am.
Meyer and Rodriguez Chavez would drive the dead and wounded out of the valley and come back to run the gauntlet of fire again and again, still trying to get to the 4 Marines trapped in the village.
You either get them out alive or you die trying. If you didn't die trying, you didn't try hard enough.
When the Marines' radios fell silent, Army Captain Will Swenson, who was pinned down just outside the village, took up the call for fire.
Captain Swenson probably made 9 or 10 different calls for fire before he probably gave up in frustration.
Does he say, look, I'm not kidding, I really need this fire?
Yeah, the evidence says he was very, very insistent in his calls for help. No question about that.
How long after the battle begins do the first helicopters show up?
It was probably an hour and 45 minutes before the first helicopters come on station.
Helicopters were finally overhead as Dakota Meyer tried to blast his way through the valley to the stranded Marines.
We interviewed a number of pilots who were there that day, and several of them stopped in mid-sentence, unable to finish their description of Meyer's actions that day. They just didn't have the words to describe it.
When the helicopters showed up, did that put an end to the ambush?
No, it didn't solve the problem, but it certainly was a great help to the soldiers and Marines and Afghans that were fighting on the ground, enabled them to move about the battlefield a little better.
With Marine Lieutenant Ademola Fabayo, who would also receive the Navy Cross, manning the machine gun, Swenson and Meyer drove deeper into the valley.
Me and Captain Swenson kept driving this unarmored truck to this valley, and rounds are going everywhere through it.
They're going through?
Like, you got both windows down. You could hear them coming, whizzing through.
A helicopter finally spotted the 4 Marines, but there was too much gunfire to land.
Well, they started to try to land, and they couldn't. They were going to get shot down. So I just took off running. And it was probably the longest run of my life. I felt like I couldn't move fast enough because it's wide open. Rounds are hitting everywhere around me. I jumped into this trench. And when I did, I landed on Gunnery Sergeant Johnson.
And he was?
He was dead.
They were all dead. First Lieutenant Michael Johnson, Sergeant Edwin Johnson, Sergeant Aaron Kennefick, and Corpsman James Doc Layton. It was now 6 hours into the battle that would also take the lives of 8 Afghan soldiers.
If we had gotten supporting aviation on station early in the fight, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. That's my firm belief.
Would those Americans be alive today?
Yeah, you can't say with any certainty, but the chances are, in my opinion, yes, they would have been.
So you've just spent the last 6 hours risking, which is not the right word, your life, throwing away your life to try to get to those guys.
Yeah.
And they're dead.
You feel nothing but being a failure,
That you couldn't get to them in time.
Yeah.
You realize that what you did was extraordinary?
No, I don't. It would have been extraordinary if I'd have brought him out alive. That would have been extraordinary.
He retrieved my son's body and
Susan Price is the mother of Aaron Kennefick. Several months after she buried her son, she received a copy of Hooker's investigation, known in military parlance as a 15-6.
When I read the 15-6 for the very first time, it actually put me in the hospital for a week.
Price and Charlene Westbrook, whose husband was grievously wounded on another part of the battlefield, have spent thousands of dollars of their own money campaigning to draw attention to what happened at Ganjgal.
We both lost a huge part of our hearts to this mission that was clearly caused by negligence.
Sergeant Kenneth Westbrook died at Walter Reed Hospital, but lived long enough to tell his wife what happened.
He told me that we were surrounded, we were ambushed, and we called for help. No one came. They kept telling us 15 minutes, and no one showed. And we were just sitting ducks.
As recommended by the investigation, letters of reprimand were issued to the captain who was in charge of the watch in the operations center and to the major who was absent from the center at critical points. The Army has not released their names.
How do you equate a piece of paper, a reprimand, to human life?
These letters of reprimand are just clearly slaps on the wrists. These officers need to be court-martialed.
What would you say to them?
I think to be the object of an official investigation which results in a general officer letter of reprimand and end your career for most professional officers is about the most profound kind of thing that can happen to you. It means professional disgrace and ruin.
Susan Price and Charlene Westbrook were not at the White House to see the president award Dakota Meyer the Medal of Honor. Will Swenson, who quit the Army, was. He too was recommended for the Medal of Honor. But as if there weren't enough negligence to tarnish this battle, the paperwork got lost and had to be started all over again. As for Ganjgal,
It's been 2 years since that operation. It's still not safe to go into Ganjgal.
It's not.
For all that loss of life, for all your courage, what was gained?
Nothing. Nothing, but at the end of the day, we still did our job. We were still fighting.
The war in Iraq is over for America, but not for the Americans who fought there. The legacy of wounded warriors will be with us for a generation. As we first showed you last November, there's a therapy program run by a group called the Troops First Foundation, a program that takes soldiers and Marines who have recovered from their physical wounds and brings them back to Iraq, back to confront the memories, back to work through the feelings of anguish that many troops have when they are taken from the war zone and sent home, leaving their buddies to fight on without them. A total of 68 soldiers and Marines have been on this remarkable journey, and we went along with a group of 8 as they returned to the battlefield for what they call Operation Proper Exit.
For most of them, it had been a long time since they'd flown on a military transport or worn the uniform. They'd been wounded years ago, and several were civilians now. But for 1 week, in Operation Proper Exit, they were proper soldiers and Marines again. As the C-130 lumbered over the desert, they crowded the windows to look across the battlefields and the memories of the war that had changed their lives. An honor guard awaited them in Baghdad, and so did uncertainty. They didn't know how or whether this program would help them. First off the plane was Marine Corporal Matt Bradford, returning to the place that has haunted him the last 4 years.
I wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep because I keep thinking about, getting blown up, laying there on the ground.
Bradford was blown up in 2007. He was 20 then, inspired to join the Corps by 9/11. The last thing he saw in Iraq, the last thing he ever saw, was the wire that turned out to be a roadside bomb. He was blinded and lost both legs. Bradford came back to reimagine that final vision of Iraq.
Still, I always has that picture in the back of my head, of looking down and seeing, the wires going into the pipe, that, shrapnel going straight in my eyeballs.
Some folks would think that after what happened to you, you'd never want to get anywhere close to this place again.
Ever since I've been hurt and stuff, I've had a lot of people tell me I couldn't do something. And I told them I would return back to Iraq, someday. I don't let people get me down on anything. If they tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go find a way to do it.
No means go.
Can't's not in my vocabulary.
He trusts only a handful of people with the job of being his eyes.
Ed Salau came to be Matt Bradford's guide, but he also served in Iraq and paid for it. In 2004, then Army Lieutenant Salau was leading a patrol of armored vehicles, and on the way back to the base, they were hit. He and his gunner each had a leg blown off.
We won that fight. We lost a couple of legs. Life's different. I jokingly say I had 10 really good months and 1 really bad day.
Salau blames himself for leading his patrol into an ambush, and like a lot of soldiers and Marines we've talked to, he feels guilty about leaving his men when he was medevaced out of Iraq.
You felt like you let them down.
Absolutely.
By leaving.
Absolutely.
When you first heard about Operation Proper Exit, what did you think?
I had to come back. You know what? This place doesn't take from you what you don't give it.
Coming back here means a lot to me.
Of the 8, returning may have been toughest for Stephen Cornford. To look at him, you don't see scarring. There are no amputations. He left Iraq and was awarded the Silver Star for valor. But they don't give away Silver Stars for nothing. And when we sat down with Cornford, we learned what post-traumatic stress disorder is all about.
When you were coming over here for Operation Proper Exit, did you wonder whether you were doing the right thing?
Sometimes. My wife brought up a good point when I told her I wanted to do it. She's like, what if it makes it worse? What if it brings it all back? Because for a while, I would sleepwalk and scream in my sleep and stuff, and I haven't been doing that a lot lately, but when I found out I was coming back for about a week before, I started doing it again, and it really scared her.
His nightmares are rooted in Easter Sunday 2007. Stephen Cornford's platoon assaulted an enemy machine gun nest. He was hit in the left shoulder. His lieutenant, Philip Neal, sprinted forward to help, but was cut down. Through enemy fire, Cornford reached the lieutenant, and he tried to stop the bleeding from the artery in the lieutenant's leg.
I didn't have much pressure with my left arm, so once I found the spot on him that had the worst injury where it was bleeding the most, I tried to stop it by laying on it with pressure dressing on it.
And this whole time you're returning fire?
Yes, sir.
Cornford threw 2 hand grenades into the machine gun nest, and then he carried Lieutenant Neal a mile to a medevac helicopter that took them both to a field hospital. The lieutenant didn't make it, and Cornford cannot forgive himself.
And they pronounced my lieutenant dead. The last thing I remember before they put me out for surgery and blood transfusions and stuff like that was they all salute when they pronounce somebody dead. And I was fighting the nurses and the doctors with the one good arm I did have to get up and salute, and they wouldn't let me get up. And finally I just blacked out and woke up the next morning in a lot of pain.
How old were you?
18 years old.
Why did you come back here?
To try and let it go. It's something that haunts me every day.
What is it that you're trying to let go?
I see his face every time I close my eyes to go to sleep at night. I blame myself a lot because I got hit first and he was coming to get me. I want to be able to lay it to rest like he is, because I know he's in a better place. I know he would want me to.
We want to welcome you back.
Operation Proper Exit helps Cornford and the others lay down some of the burden by bringing them back not just to a place, but to a time that they were proud of.
Thanks for all you guys did and do and continue to do.
The trip is a tour, and every stop is part of the therapy. Back with the troops.
You're still walking down the wing, you're about halfway down.
The machines. And the weapons that were their strength.
Hell yeah!
Yo! They all love putting the uniform back on. It motivates them, it takes them back to something that they love, absolutely love.
Rick Kell started Operation Proper Exit and leads the trips. In Iraq, he's in uniform, but he's never been in the military. Kell heads the Troops First Foundation and volunteered at Walter Reed Army Medical Center.
How did this idea occur to you?
It really didn't occur to me. It was presented to me by a corps of wounded warriors at Walter Reed that I saw frequently. In every conversation that came up, I want to go back. I need to go back.
In a sense, for many of these young men and women, they didn't leave Iraq. They were unconscious.
They were taken from Iraq. When they arrived home last time, there were no homecomings. Many woke up after comas of 3 weeks or more, significantly different in many ways. A lot of it's a blur, and they have to put those pieces back together, and they do. Many do. And but the one piece they couldn't put back was the piece of exiting and leaving the way they thought they would leave, with their team, with their battle buddies.
In 2008, Kell brought the idea to the Pentagon, and they turned him down. Then Ray Odierno, the commanding general in Iraq, heard about Kell. Odierno's son had been wounded.
Thanks for all your help.
Have a good flight, sir. You're welcome.
And the general gave Kell the go-ahead for Operation Proper Exit. Today, a total of 68 troops have been on Kell's journey. The tour that we joined was the 9th Proper Exit. The hardest stops on the itinerary confront that day, years ago, when they were wounded. First stop, the Air Force Theater Hospital. Lives were saved and friends were lost in this emergency room. The medical staff had changed, but everyone understood what these men had survived.
I don't remember coming through here.
For Matt Bradford, it was more than just a chance to say thanks. It was a step towards peace of mind.
I lost both my legs and also my vision. And I know a handshake or a hug ain't enough, but you all pretty much, I mean, you know, I owe y'all my life.
The next step, back in time, was to fly over the places where they were wounded.
I'm relieved.
For Ed Salau, it was an opportunity to see what Iraq had gained from his sacrifice.
I needed to see. I needed to see what was going on here. The newspapers weren't telling me what I was looking for. How many schools were being built? How many wells were being dug? Because that's what I was trying to get done. How many imams were getting trucks of fresh drinking water to their villages that I'd promised them so many times? But IEDs kept blowing them up. I needed to see that was fixed.
Is that what you saw?
That's exactly what I saw. I saw people looking to their government for solutions. It was finally becoming Iraq's Iraq, and they were working to make sure the U.S. would leave and they would be okay when it happened. I needed to see that.
Of all the troops, the man most determined to see the scene of his battle was Stephen Cornford.
My whole life since I came home from Iraq has been hell because of that night.
Perhaps it's impossible to understand if you haven't lived it. Cornford scoured maps and strained to see. He was grasping for something, eye contact with the night his nightmares were made of. And touching it again let him begin to let go.
I feel a little more relaxed with myself, because one of the things I deal with on a daily basis is I don't even like being myself. I want to get out of my own skin. I don't like being me, because I feel bad constantly, and it's starting to go away a little bit. I feel a little more comfortable with myself and with what I've done in my life.
When you go back to the States this time, how do you think you'll be different?
I know I'll be a lot less angry. I'll treat my wife with a little more respect. I won't be so, I guess, snappy with people. I'll be a little more understanding, because I always hear people complain about stuff. And it just makes me mad, because a lot of people don't understand. They don't see the stuff that they just go about their daily lives while there's still people dying every day for them. And it upsets me a lot. And it just, I'm starting to feel a little better about it. So.
Each man came for a different reason. To remember peace of mind, to see again, to walk out of Iraq. Before their return, the enemy had had the last word. But now, after a week, they'd rewritten that history. This was their proper exit. They were guided by the eyes of others or walked on artificial legs. Those things would not change. But as they left on their own terms now, the enemy was retreating from the battlefield of their minds.
With the American pullout from Iraq, the proper exit trips there have ended. The first Operation Proper Exit to Afghanistan will take place later this year. In World War II, there were 5 brothers serving on a ship in the Pacific that was attacked by the Japanese. Their name was Sullivan, the Sullivan Brothers, and their story has become part of American folklore because they all died. That was more than 60 years ago, but their deaths cast a shadow that still hangs over military commanders today, and they do everything they can to prevent siblings from going to war together. There's no official military policy, but it is an unwritten rule, which is why it may surprise you, as it did us, to learn that 5 sets of brothers, all Marines, were serving together in the same battalion in Afghanistan. Lara Logan tracked them down to the edge of an unforgiving desert in the south of the country, where she met the Beans brothers, 2 fourth-generation Marines who went to extraordinary lengths to go to war together. At 60 Minutes, we've covered a lot of stories on the war in Afghanistan, but this is not a story about war and battle. It's a story about brothers.
We kind of felt like we had something to give back to our country. You know, we saw the legacy that we were handed down, and we kind of realized, without being pushed, but we just kind of realized that, you know, there's so many other people that have given so much more than we did, that we can enjoy the life that we enjoy.
Assalamu alaikum. This is not the first time the Beans brothers have served together. Daniel, or Big Beans as he's called,
hey, he's saying they don't want you guys going through there,
and his younger brother Joshua, known as Little Beans, were in Iraq 4 years ago.
It's like being with your best friend, you know. Yeah. We slept right next to each other. You know, we lived in a little mud hut, but, you know, we had a little plywood wall, and I lived on one side and he lived on the other. And that was, you know, pretty much how we lived for 7 months.
Did you talk to each other through that wall?
Sometimes I would knock real softly and wake him up in the morning.
You were like his live alarm clock?
No, I just, every once in a while I'd knock and make sure he was still there.
The Beans brothers weren't home from Iraq very long when they decided they wanted to go to Afghanistan together. President Obama had just announced he was sending 30,000 more troops to fight there. But the brothers' Marine Reserve Unit in Florida wasn't scheduled to deploy. So they spent the next 2 years searching for one that was, and found the Lone Star Battalion in Texas. The problem was, to serve with that unit, they had to come up with a story and an address in Texas.
We were opening up a lawn care business in Plano, Texas. That was our reasoning for making the move.
We had to have a reason to move to Texas and join that unit.
He worked the weed whacker.
So that's what we decided we were going to do, is we'd move to Plano, Texas, which I still, to this day, don't know where that is.
No idea.
That's a lot of trouble to go and fight in a war that not many Americans believe is worth fighting these days.
That's the great thing about America. Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Is everything going okay, guys?
Lieutenant Colonel Todd Zink had an opinion, and it wasn't one the brothers would like. As their new commanding officer, he did not think they should serve together and decided immediately to separate them.
Everyone brings up the Sullivan Brothers
from
World
the
War II.
Second World War.
Yeah. And so I thought it was, my responsibility to try to minimize what harm could possibly come to any 2 sets of brothers.
Sullivan! Man this gun! The story of the Sullivan brothers was turned into this movie called The Fighting Sullivans, a heartbreaking account of how all 5 brothers died in 1942 after a Japanese submarine torpedoed their ship.
There's just something about that bond of family and the idea that, 2 brothers might not come back. That kind of kicks you in the gut.
Yeah, it does. I could see my own brother and I almost wanting the same thing, though. I think if we found ourselves in the same unit, were that close. So, and as hard as it is, I can kind of understand them to some extent.
They have to look at it from the other side of the table and say, well, if they were to both die while they were over there, then it'd look really bad on us, and family would hate us.
They were very eloquent in front of me, but I still wasn't convinced that this, having them together would be the right thing.
But Colonel Zink had no idea what he was up against. The Beans brothers' family is steeped in Marine history. Their grandfather and great-grandfather both rose to brigadier general, and the boy's father, Mark, was also a Marine.
And I told them I couldn't face their mother if they were both lost. And almost on cue, they presented a letter from their parents.
In the letter, Mark and his wife Crystal wrote, "We understand that both our sons could be lost or injured at the same time, but we would rather know that the two of them are together regardless of what happens."
Was that incredible to you, that the mother and father of these two young men were prepared to go to such lengths to see them risk their lives together?
It is kind of incredible, but maybe it's indicative that they really know their sons and maybe what their sons really desired.
Colonel Zink and the brothers' company commander, Major Mark Wood, struggled for weeks to come up with a way they as commanders could go against convention and support sending the brothers into combat together.
You decided what?
They would not be in the same squad, different squads, and they would not be on the same mission.
So those were the only restrictions?
Yes.
Some would call that a brave decision, considering the risk.
It's my decision. I'd have to live with it.
The Beans brothers had won, but the victory was not theirs alone. There were 4 other sets of brothers in the Lone Star Battalion, and all of them would now be allowed to serve together.
I've never heard of 5 sets in one battalion. That's truly extraordinary.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented, yes.
We managed to get 8 of the brothers together at a remote U.S. base in southern Afghanistan. The youngest of the group are the Hendricksons, 20-year-old Bobby and his older brother Cody, who's 23. Gunnery Sergeant Hector Vega looks out for both of them, and for his younger brother, Sergeant Francisco Vega, who couldn't make it to the interview. Lance Corporal Matthew Faisler was the only one serving without his brother. Jonathan Faisler was injured during training. Raul Hernandez and his older brother Will are both Lance Corporals, and they also come from a family of Marines.
Do you worry about your brother out here?
I worry about him a lot. When he first got to the unit, I was like a mother hen. He was a Marine, but I still feel like we're, little kids again. My mom told me, take care of your brother.
What did your parents think about you joining the Marines?
My mother actually went into the recruiting office and chewed out the recruiters. So she went in there, raising hell.
So she must have been thrilled when your brother joined.
Yeah, when he joined, yeah, she just didn't know what to do. We made the best of it. We comforted her as much as we could. We don't tell her certain things, we sugarcoat it. We church it up a lot whenever we call home.
You church it up a lot?
We church it up a lot. We make things sound like, oh, it's fine, everything's good,
This miserable stretch of desert road is where Daniel and Joshua Beans spend most of their time out here. Highway 1 is the lifeblood of the U.S. war effort, pumping supplies and fuel to every U.S. base across the country. Convoys like this stretch for miles, up to 1,000 tankers long, and the hired guns who guard them rarely wear uniforms.
It makes it a little bit nerve-wracking, when you're seeing guns, you're seeing weapons, and you're assuming, based on the indicators that you've got, that these are in fact private contractors. But at the end of the day, you never know. All you're doing is walking up to a truckload of people with guns.
The last thing you want to do is kill an innocent person.
Correct.
But you also don't want it to be you.
It's a double-edged sword, yes, ma'am.
In this part of Afghanistan, the Taliban still has strong support, in spite of the surge of U.S. troops. But they've changed their tactics. Instead of taking the Marines on in a close-up fight, they're concentrating now on a weapon that costs them little, bigger, deadlier roadside bombs. This is the scene of a massive attack on the Brothers Battalion. 5 Marines were trapped inside this burning vehicle. The roadside bomb they hit was so powerful, it sent their 17-ton MRAP flying through the air.
You just don't flip an MRAP. doesn't happen. It has to be a massive amount of explosives.
Did you think they could all be dead?
Of course. Of course.
What are you telling yourself?
Is it bargaining?
Bargaining?
Bargaining. I was praying a little bit and asking for it not to be all of them. And maybe 2. Not 3, not 4, not all 5. Just let a couple survive, please.
For Major Wood, it was nothing short of a miracle that all 5 men inside the vehicle survived. One of them was crippled for life.
God was looking after us that day. We were hoping for the best, but we were preparing ourselves for the worst.
There was another event in the brothers' deployment that took a heavier toll. 2 of their Marines were killed by a U.S. drone that mistakenly targeted them in the midst of an intense firefight, the first incident of its kind since drone strikes began. It was Gunnery Sergeant Vega's job to help the men get through it. At 33, he's like the elder statesman and big brother of this group. And even though he's one of 4 Marines in his family, this was the first time he'd been allowed to deploy with one of his brothers.
Knowing that your brother's here, you almost have to put yourself at a different state of mind, if you will, to where if something does happen, how are you going to react? What are you going to say? What are you going to do? I role play, psychologically prepare myself.
Do you have a speech, something you would say to his wife? Something prepared?
No. How can you prepare, Laura, for things like that? What can you possibly say?
In all your years, you've been in the Marines, 17 years. Have you ever seen this many brothers together serving at the same time?
No, not at all.
Same place?
It's history in the making, if you ask me. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's good.
There's an ending to this story, and it's a happy one. All of the brothers made it home alive. The Beans brothers said the experience brought them closer. But for their parents, who wrote that letter that helped send their sons to war together, the worrying didn't stop until both their boys got home to Florida safely.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you.
I love you too.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to hear the story of Bill, the puppy that Laura Logan and the U.S. Marines tried to rescue.
I'm Scott Pelley. Thanks for joining us. 60 Minutes will be back next week.